You know, the MEG field is all about timing, and it's probably not then a coincidence that this is the 40th anniversary of David Cohen's famous paper, basically heralding the modern field of MEG research. In 1972, this paper in Science on using MEG to record the alpha rhythm. 40 years today. Not today, 40 years this year. 40 years this year. And it is a tremendous honor to have him as our next speaker. It says that MEG was developed here at MIT. The MEG facility we have here is, in a sense, a kind of homecoming again for MEG at MIT. And we all owe the start of that field to David. Just a little bit about his background. He originally came from Canada. He got his PhD at Berkeley in nuclear physics. And after a string of positions in universities, he was at the University of Chicago, where he pioneered the use of magnetically shielded rooms to start picking up magnetic fields from brain, and published in 1968 a paper on detecting the alpha rhythm with
Illinois, University of Illinois.
Illinois.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. University of Illinois.
Accuracy.
But it was close.
Yes.
You know, and in MEG, you just got to get close. It was 1968, he published a paper picking up the alpha rhythm with a magnetic signal, but that had not yet used the SQUID detector. And then he moved to MIT, to the Francis Bitter Lab, and he began collaborating with James Zimmerman, who had developed a SQUID, and they collaborated to put the SQUIDs in a magnetically shielded room. And again, it was the famous 1972 paper announcing the use of MEG to record these brain signals, and that really got the whole ball rolling. He, as the field of biomagnetism began to grow, he founded the Biomag organization. They started having their meetings, and it's now the most popular and important meeting in the field. He stayed at MIT. In fact, he remains a visiting scientist at MIT, but in 1993, also he took a position at MGH and has continued to work on MEG and biomagnetism since then. He has a string of papers on the properties of MEG and comparing MEG to EEG and so on. It's just really a seminal figure in the field in every possible way, and we're delighted to be able to have him speak here today.
Thanks, Bob. What an honor it is to see the fruits of all this work after 40 and more years. So a nice day for me. Thank you all. So when Charles asked me to give a talk, he said it would be nice if the students could learn about how things get invented and talk about how you brought all this about. So I'm tailoring this as a real story of what really happened, not so much technical, what went on behind the scenes and how it all happened, good or bad. So maybe one way to start is let's roll the tape back to let's roll the tape back to 1953. So what we have here, I'm a graduate student, that's me. University of California at Berkeley, the famous Berkeley cyclotron. The cyclotron is over here, and it's well shielded by concrete shielding. Shielding to keep out the nuclear particles. We worked with a big magnet looking at a beam. There I am doing a thesis, my colleagues. My field in nuclear physics was magnets and partly shielding. Magnets and shielding. That's where I come from. Okay, let's jump another 10 years. I now have a fancy job at the Argonne National Laboratory doing high energy physics at Argonne and working with big magnets. And for some reason, I'm thinking, year in and year out, wouldn't it be fun to measure very weak magnetic fields? Where would weak magnetic fields come from? And why? They must come from human beings. That would be interesting. So I began to write proposals back in 1963 to the laboratory to look for such magnetic fields. Here is a proposal in 1963. I asked for money to build a shielded room to look at magnetic fields in the human body. Now, at that time in '63, two people actually measured the magnetic field of the heart, Bowley and McPhee in Syracuse, using two huge coils over a chest. This subject lay on a field outside of Syracuse, two huge coils, and they actually saw the magnetic field of the heart using this crude equipment and published a paper. That was the first paper in Biomag. I had a different idea, which is to use a lot of shielding, keep out the disturbances, and use much better detectors. But I couldn't get the money to do it. But that's where my heart was. I wanted to begin to do it. And a friend of mine, this guy here, had just become head of physics department at the new Chicago Circle campus, University of Illinois. And he said, look here, I've got to build a whole physics department. I'd rather take the people I know and make them professors than strangers. So if you come and take a professorship here, I'll get you all your money to make your funny shielded room. So here I was, faced with a choice, and it was a very high-risk choice. I had a fancy job at a big national laboratory. I'd have to give it up and go to a state university, and you can imagine what they're like at first in the city of Chicago. And my life circumstances were such that I could take a chance. I did it. I left Argonne, left a secure job, joined the University of Illinois, getting some sort of professorship with a promise of tenure. You know what that means, right? And I took my chances, and right away there was trouble right off the bat. Here, a memo, an internal memo from the head of his physics department saying, leave Cohen alone, let him build his facility. You don't want to read the details, but that's just the sort of thing that went on. But I built my room. They gave me the money, and there's the first shielded room in Biomag, 1967. There were no squids, and the detectors we used were coils. Coils of wire. That's a picture of a coil, maybe 500,000 turns of wire, a piece of ferrite. Just a big coil, not as big as Bowley McPhee, but a small coil, and measured the magnetic field of the heart, and there it was, loud and clear. There's the field of the heart. There's the simultaneous electrocardiogram. I did a lot of physics, proved there was a magnetic field coming from the heart. You could do good physics even though it was crude, and published a paper. That paper in 1967. Now, that was an important paper because the New York Times picked it up and they made a big splash. Now, that article saved my life, and it saved biomagnetism, and I'll tell you how. We'll do that a little later, but there was a big splash written up all over the place. People noticed it, a lot of phone calls, things like that. Then I thought it'd be interesting to measure the magnetic field of the brain with these coils. It should be there, and you can calculate what the magnetic field should be. And I fooled around with coils, did a lot of physics of coils. Here is a very fancy coil, pulled apart for the picture, maybe 2 million turns of copper, and a lot of calculations out of my notebook at the time, different ways of winding the coil, different parameters of the coil, how that coil should behave. Straight, hard physics to try to get it sensitive enough to do it. And the first searches in about 1967, 68, after the heart, a flashing light down a tube, I try to look at evoked response. A subject sitting in the room and couldn't see anything, didn't work. Out of my notebook at the time, give up the flashing light, try different forms of detector, try using the alpha rhythm in some way. And here's a real schematic. The idea is, in those days, two EEG leads, and you get an EEG signal doing that from the alpha. You get an alpha rhythm, EEG, two EEG leads looking at the alpha rhythm right here. And so you're looking at a dipole under the leads that look like that, the alpha rhythm dipole, and trigger the coil for signal averaging using that. So you're looking at you're selecting that particular dipole. You can calculate what the magnetic field should be, and it worked. Here is a trace. There's one trace. There's no subject there, just the coil in the room. Look at the noise. One trace. One trace showed you nothing, but after 9,000 traces, there is the EEG. There's an MEG signal coming out of the noise. That's about 10 minutes, 15 minutes of averaging. Not very practical, but it's there. And you could map the magnetic field around the head with this big coil. It took months. And eventually, there's a picture of the magnetic field around the head done in that way, due to that particular dipole chosen that way. Published a paper in Science, also a big noise, but what happened was, politically, career-wise, utter disaster. I took a chance, boom. I had come up for tenure. Here is a memo from the internal workings of the physics department. Shall we give Cohen tenure, it says. And what it really says is, he's a great guy, he does good work, we don't want him in this department. So much for the promise of tenure, bye-bye. And I had taken my chances, and this is what happens with new technologies. But MIT had read the New York Times, and this man, Ben Lax, head of the Magnet Lab, down the street, the famous Francis Bitter Magnet Lab, he was aware of all this, and he knew what was happening to me. And Ben has a friend in this room. We just chatted a while ago. Ben's still alive. He's 100 years old. So Ben says, we'll make a home for you. We offer you a job. What he offered me was all the money and all the space I wanted right at MIT, everything. You'll never cross over and be faculty. You'll be soft money like most of you. Soft money all the way, no faculty position. In those days, he says, that's the deal. We'll help you get all the money you want. It was a marvelous laboratory. I grabbed it. And then I could really get started. So I had a position, I had a lot of space. The money I got, the 5-year established investigatorship of the American Heart Association. 5 years, full salary, no questions asked. What a fellowship that was. MIT got it for me, you know, and that allowed me to do anything I wanted to do. So here I was, my dreams were about to come true. So the first thing I wanted was a really good shielded room. There is an artist's view drawn at that time of what I wanted. And in fact, that's what I built. Although this is a different view. That's the shielded room I built. 5 layers, 3 of mu metal, 2 of pure aluminum, in the shape of a sphere, which is very efficient. Too small for the systems today, but a superb shielded room. And here are some signs of construction. Here's the core going up, the very inside, complicated. Here's a student taking aluminum plates and silvering them so they form junctions. Here's more of the core going in. Look how complicated it is. We sort of drew it as we went along. Here's more of it going up. There it is, almost complete. The construction crew. My carpenter from Illinois, he had come out to help me. 3 MIT students and me. We built the thing in about 5 or 6 months. And that's what I looked like in those days. Not the old pathetic wreck you see in front of you, but a cocky guy who knew what he wanted to do and went ahead and did it and took his chances. And so here it was. I had a shielded room in 1969, but only those very noisy detectors. What we needed was a good detector. And suddenly appeared in view this guy, Jim Zimmerman, the inventor of the squid. I had heard that he had invented a superb magnetic detector. Jim passed away in '99. We were brought together. He brought his squid to the shielded room. We put it in the shielded room, mounted it, and looked at the magnetic field of his heart. And there is the magnetic field of Jim Zimmerman's heart, New Year's Eve, 1969, as clear as a regular electrocardiogram. Wow. And we knew we were in pay dirt. This is it, the right detector for the right room. And we took a picture the next day, put a pretty secretary there. And there is a Navy guy that gave us some money, myself and Jim. That's what he looked like, very imposing guy. But we have him to thank for the squid. And so we published this paper. Science called it the Magna Carta of biomagnetism, the first measurement of the human body with a squid in when was that? 1970, I guess. Yep, there it is.
That's when they received it.
And, huh?
That's when they received it. I say that's when it was received. It doesn't.
Published in 1972. And that got biomagnetism going around the world generally. But, you know, in those days, it was the heart I was after, and it was the heart everyone was after. No one thought about the brain. There were EEG people. They didn't make models of the brain. It wasn't neuroscientifically or scientifically interesting. It was the heart. The heart was the silver bullet, and it was a marvelous. Let me tell you a little about the laboratory. The magnet lab in those days was a marvelous place. So many technologies going on, and so many ways of doing things. The magnet lab, the purpose of the lab was to make strong magnetic fields for users to come from all over the world. It was a national laboratory. And so here we had a laboratory with enormously strong magnetic fields and me with a very weak magnetic field. It was picked up by, here's a lot of fun, Guinness Book of World Records, and strongest magnetic fields in the world, the weakest, a range of 10 to the 17 in one laboratory. We learned how to do magnetism. You know, superb people. It was a marvelous place in those days. But I was after the heart. And in the next year or two, here's a scene from a page from my notebook. Heart, 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 heart. Every once in a while, I'd think about the brain. There was no one else, just me, just one person doing it. I thought about the brain. The system, I still use Jim's original squid, which was not, it was in a glass dewar that looked like that, and the detector was way back there, too far from the brain to be interesting. I couldn't see anything. This was the general arrangement out of my notebook. And I began, but now I had a lot of money pouring in, so I began to buy commercial squids. The SHE company was just formed, and they sold me the first 2 squids they made. There's what it looked like, one of the first SHE squids. The shielded room was really superb. The floor independently suspended. If you jumped up and down on the floor, you didn't rock the walls at all. You could do tricks. It was a superb room, and you could do a lot of interesting things. I still didn't measure the brain, except with 1 or 2 of these new squids. One looked like this. There's a picture of a guy in there. And lo and behold, there's the first good picture of the algorithm of the brain measured with a squid. There's the trace, 1971, algorithm, eyes closed, eyes open, eyes closed, as good as an EEG. We had it. Published this paper, which is now 40 years old. That's the paper we're celebrating. That's the paper. And let me tell you a little bit what was in that paper. That got the ball rolling for other people for MEGs. It was that particular paper. Here's the abstract. You can glance at it. Here's some of the this is the figure out of it. There's the eyes open, closed. You've seen that. An abnormal subject, 3 EEG traces on the head, 1 MEG trace. What's missing is the 5 hertz theta wave. Didn't take much to understand. That's because it was a radial source. If you looked at the EEG traces, you could see that it really was a radial source missing from the MEG. A lot of what we do today, you could already do in 1972. And that's the paper that got the ball rolling in the MEG. That's the paper that we're celebrating now. And now let me fast forward to today. The big step along the way was, you couldn't really do much with the MEG because all you could do is measure 1 location at a time, 1 trace. You can't solve for where the sources are. You get something that looked like an EEG, what are you going to do with it? It's later on, when these marvelous companies began to make multi-channel systems, that everyone realized that you could make a map over the head and then solve inward for where the sources are. You needed a map over the whole head to do it. Here is the beginning. That's Marty tells me that's a slide from 1989. Companies began to make. That's 37 channels, not quite the whole head. They put 2 of them together sometime. And of course, now we end up with a superb electric system that we have today. That's almost the state of the art. And here we are today. So, and the future, well, we're in Boston. Boston is the future. I mean, look, 3 systems in Boston now, maybe 4 soon. Boston is a center for MEG, and the big things are probably going to happen here, maybe. And anyway, the moral of the story is, if you believe in something, just do it and get it done. And in closing, let me just say, I'm still here. Thank you, Bob. That's beautiful.
We'll send this over to you.
Okay.
I'm not
new metal.
Is it?
Oh yeah. Here we should.
Let me thank you, but also let me thank you for the colleagues who, they may not have measured the MEG, but who worked behind the scenes so hard. The people at Illinois, and then the people down the street at the Magnet Lab who put in so much time. It doesn't look like much went into that, but building that shielded room, all the expertise, and the hundreds of people who knew what they were doing and helped in this thing. It couldn't have been done without it. So they thank you too. Okay.
The whole ball rolling. He, as the field of biomagnetism began to grow, he founded the Biomag organization. They started having their meetings, and it's now the most popular and important meeting in the field. He stayed at MIT. In fact, he remains a visiting scientist at MIT, but in 1993, also he took a position at MGH and has continued to work on mag and biomagnetism since then. He has a string of papers on the properties of mag and comparing mag to EEG and so on. It's just really a seminal figure in the field in every possible way, and we're delighted to be able to have the facility we have here is in a sense a kind of homecoming again for MEG at MIT. And we all owe the start of that field to David. Just a little bit about his background. He originally came from Canada. He got his PhD at Berkeley in nuclear physics. And after a string of positions in universities, he was at the University of Chicago, where he pioneered the use of magnetically shielded rooms to start picking up magnetic fields from brain, and published in 1968 a paper on detecting the alpha rhythm with
Illinois, University of Illinois.
Illinois.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, University of Illinois.
Accuracy.
But it was close.
Yes.
You know, and in Meg, you just got to get close. It was 1968, he published a paper picking up the alpha rhythm with a magnetic signal, but that had not yet used the squid detector. And then he moved to MIT, to the Francis Bitter Lab, and he began collaborating with James Zimmerman, who had developed a squid, and they collaborated to put the squids in a magnetically shielded room. And again, it was the famous 1972 paper announcing the use of MEG to record these brain signals, and that really got. You know, the MEG field is all about timing, and it's probably not then a coincidence that this is the 40th anniversary of David Cohen's famous paper, basically heralding the modern field of MEG research. In 1972, his paper in Science on using MEG to record the alpha rhythm. 40 years today, not today, 40 years this year, 40 years this year, and there's a tremendous honor to have him as our next speaker. It says that MEG was developed here at MIT, that the MEG speak here today.
Thanks, Bob. What an honor it is to see the fruits of all this work after 40 and more years. So a nice day for me. Thank you all. So when Charles asked me to give a talk, he said it would be nice if the students could learn about how things get invented and talk about how you brought all this about. So I'm tailoring this as a real story of what really happened, not so much technical, what went on behind the scenes